It started like any other morning outside the Lakeview County Courthouse. Cool air, coffee steam, the shuffle of briefcases on stone. But within seconds, everything shattered. A black woman, calm and professional, was slammed against the wall. Her papers scattered like confetti in the wind. Laughter followed. Cameras didn't blink. What no one realized, not the officers, not the bystanders, was that the woman they just cuffed wasn't a suspect. She was the presiding judge of that very courthouse. And when she came back wearing her robes, the courtroom and the entire city would never breathe the same way again. Sometimes justice doesn't walk in with sirens or headlines. It walks in quietly, wearing bruises and carrying proof. That morning in Riverton, a slap wasn't just an assault, it was a spark. And when Judge Maya Ellison stood back up, the system that tried to silence her was about to learn what real accountability sounds like. By 7:45, the morning light on Lakeview County Courthouse had gone from steel to honey. Riverton moved like a machine just getting warmed, trash trucks yawning down side streets, a vendor sliding a cart of muffins into the shadow of the granite steps, a bailiff crossing the plaza with a paper cup and a map of the day's chaos in his head. Judge Maya Ellison reached the bottom step with her briefcase in her left hand and the quiet, particular breath she always took before a long docket. The latch on the leather case clicked faintly with each stride. A second heartbeat. She wasn't wearing robes. She never wore robes outside. Robes belonged to the room. Blouse pressed, slacks neat, flats that looked like they were made to respect marble. She checked the time and the sky, both of which looked fair. She checked her inner list. Peterson at 9, an evidentiary squabble at 10:15, 2 sentences after lunch. She stepped into the cool shadow of the courthouse facade and angled for the main doors. "East entrance," a voice said. Blocking, not warning. "Staff only goes east." The officer in front of her matched his tone to his posture, broad through the chest, chin cocked just enough to make you reposition your own. Name strip read, Maddox. The way he stood said he'd practiced it in mirrors and parking lots. Maya met his eyes level. "I'm headed to the main security line." He gave the little head tilt of inconvenience, turning to disdain. "ID." She reached for her wallet. Habit, smooth, deliberate. But the man was already talking again. Something like, "Not there." Something like, "Don't reach." Something like the warning officers give when they've already decided they need one. He didn't really look at her. He looked at the space around her, the air she took up. "Sir," she said evenly, "I'm going into the courthouse to time 400. His open palm cut across her cheek so hard it rang. The sound of it was the sound a hallway makes when people stop talking. Her head snapped. The briefcase spun. The mouth of it flew open and trial binders breathed paper like startled birds. Memoranda fanned across the granite, stiff white against old stone. "Hands where I can see 'em," Maddox said, voice rising now, adrenaline finding an old groove. He drove her back into the wall with his forearm, the edge of the stone printing its cold into her shoulder blade. The smell of brass and his uniform soap and the paper dust from her files pushed into the same square foot of air. Somewhere at the bottom of the steps, a muffin cart hissed, and the vendor turned away. 2 deputies drifting off street patrol slowed like fish spotting a shimmer, phones already out without anyone saying a word. A laugh too loud for morning, the kind of laugh that asks for company. One of them said something small and dirty about where she belonged, like he was trying on language meant for a different decade. The other said nothing, and filmed. Maya kept her jaw level and her eyes up. The bruise would bloom later. Right now it was a hot pulse under the skin, a point on a map she refused to circle with her attention. She let her gaze move to the bronze plate bolted into the limestone above the door. Lakeview County Courthouse, and below the smaller plate, Presiding Judge M. Ellison. She breathed in and let the sound of her name steady her pulse. Turn, hands behind. The cuffs bit in the way cuffs always do, designed to teach you what limit means. He read a version of a script that sounded less like Miranda and more like a man narrating a hunting story to his buddies. Inside, coffee steam turned to carpet smell. Bailiff Aaron Cole stepped into an elevator with his lidless cup and the easy stride of a man who knew the hallways better than he knew his own living room. If he had been on the landing 2 minutes earlier, the morning might have forked. On to courtroom 3A, Judge Leonard Hale, visiting pale, a man whose tie knots were tighter than his smile, reviewed a stack of early arraignments he didn't ask for. "We'll do what we can until Judge Ellison arrives," he told the clerk. When Maddox marched Maya through the doorway in cuffs, there was a ripple in the oxygen, immediate and subtle. A few heads turned, one pair of eyebrows went up. A murmur tried to become a word and failed. Mercer clocked the bruise, the blouse, and the calm. Then the way the defendant's chair took this woman badly, like a suit a size too small. Somewhere in the back, Zoe Patel, young, sharp, sat forward without realizing she had moved. "Your Honor," Maddox said, settling into a practiced cadence. "Routine security contact at the main entrance. Suspect attempted to bypass protocols, refused identification, became agitated." He continued, "I exercised minimum necessary force." Judge Hale looked over his glasses. "Name of the defendant?" Maddox glanced down. Subject refused to identify herself. Maya's cuffs clicked against the chair. "How convenient," she said to the air. Hale's tone stayed careful. "Ma'am, you'll have your opportunity." "Officer, continue." "Body cam malfunctioned," Maddox lied. "However, I have partial cell video starting mid-confrontation." He held up his phone in a way that made the gallery lean. Zoe angled in her seat. The voice, the spine, the way the woman in cuffs hadn't made herself smaller. Recognition grew. "Was the defendant verbally aggressive?" Mercer asked. "Yes," Maddox said, righteous heat rising. "Obscene language, threats, resistance." People claim titles, lawyer, judge, senator, to dodge as accountability. Maya swallowed a smile that wasn't humor. "Patience is a muscle," she told new judges. "Use it before you need it." "The state recommends trespass, resisting, and assault on an officer," Mercer said. Hale nodded. "Of course." "And the alleged assault, officer?" "Minimum force, Your Honor." Aaron Cole appeared in the doorway, coffee gone sideways in his hand, face shifting through 3 colors. He saw her and knew. Maya said calmly, "Your Honor, I'd like to make a very simple request." Hale, "You may." "An immediate preservation order for all surveillance from 8:45 to 9:15, all angles, all backups, including body cams." "On what basis do you—" "On the basis that the evidence exists," Maya said, "and that the truth is bigger than any single narrative." "What is your profession, ma'am?" Maya let the question hang. "I have some experience with courtrooms," she said. "Enough to know that if we're about to make decisions, we ought to save what the cameras know." Cole stepped forward, recognizing the credential wallet. His stomach dropped into an old well called shame. Maya's gaze rested on him, then she looked back at Hale. 15 minutes, Hale said. "We'll recess for 15 minutes. The gavel struck. Silence followed, heavy enough to bend air. In a side room, Cole's hands trembled. "Judge Ellison," he whispered. "Jesus. Judge, I wasn't at the door." "It's all right," Maya said softly. "We're going to need my robe, the one with the gold piping, and my gavel." She called Chief Judge Carter. "I'm safe. I need preservation on all footage and every officer's body cam from 8:45 to 9:15. And," Maya added, "we'll be opening Officer Maddox's case history." Cole returned with the garment bag like it was a flag. Time 400 mam. Maya stood and unzipped the robe. The fabric fell with a hush that sounded like a verdict unwraps. "Announce me properly," she said. "You know how." "Court is now in session," Cole's voice boomed. "All rise." Every inch of the gallery found itself vertical. Judge Maya Ellison walked through in black and gold and light. She sat, and the room sat with her. "Officer Maddox," she said, "about 2 hours ago you offered sworn testimony in this courtroom. You told us I was erratic, that I refused to identify myself, that your camera malfunctioned." She touched the tablet, and the screen brightened with footage. The image of a face turned by force makes its own noise. "Officer," Maya said quietly, "do you see any aggression from me on this footage?" Silence moved like a tide. "Dean." She opened the body cam backup. Maddox's voice filled the speakers, ugly in a way that came from confidence, not volume. The room heard the contempt, the proof, the truth. Maya stopped the recording. "Officer," she said, "you told this court that your camera malfunctioned. You thought the cloud would behave like a report that waits for your signature. It does not. I will be issuing preservation orders," she said. "Failure to comply will be treated as spoliation and contempt." The court reporter's hands raced. The air thickened with consequence. "Court will recess," she said, "while I consider appropriate charges." The gavel touched wood. It didn't travel far, but it went deep. Maya stood. She could feel the bruise making its argument under her skin. She also felt what the room felt, the shift from one set of rules to another. On her way to chambers, she passed Zoe. She passed Mercer. She passed Maddox. Cole opened the right door at the right time. Maya closed her eyes for one breath, then two. When she opened them, the world had the same corners and edges it had before, but she had put names on more of them. 15 minutes later, when she returned to the bench, the room would be a different room. For now, she touched the gavel with the pad of her thumb, the way you touch a friend's shoulder before a difficult truth. And the courthouse, old stone, new cameras, tired carpets, stubborn hope, held its breath and waited with her for what came next. The room they gave her during recess still smelled faintly of copier toner and the cheap citrus cleaner the night crew favored. The fluorescent tubes above hummed like a bench conference no one wanted to join. Maya stood with her palms on the little stainless counter, robe settling across her shoulders, weight finding its balance the way a chorus finds its pitch. In the mirror of the darkened window, she caught her own outline, the gold piping, the bruise rising like an ink spill under her left cheekbone, and she let herself count to 5. Not for pain control, for precision. Cole hovered at the door as if his shoes were 2 steps from breaking parole. "It is mirroring the drives, Your Honor," he managed. "Chief Carter called down herself. They're doing it off-site, too." "Good," Maya said. She tapped a message to her clerk, hold all afternoon matters pending reassignment, then slid the phone face down beside the wooden box. The gavel's handle had a nick at the base only 3 people on Earth could spot, a hairline mark from a night years ago when the power flickered mid-verdict and all the lights went out except what lived in her voice. She touched the nick with her thumb like a fingerprint she kept returning to. "Bailiff," she said, and Cole straightened as if the word itself were a spine. "If any officer attempts to access or interact with security storage without a court order, you will detain them for contempt and call me. No exceptions. Use the back hallway if you must." "Yes, Your Honor," he said, fear and relief braided in the same breath. "And Aaron," she added. He blinked. "Thank you for coming back." He nodded once and left, and the door sighed behind him like a tired usher. Maya let the hum of the ceiling settle into the background until it became a metronome. She looked down at her hands. They were steady in a way that would have frightened her if she were the kind of person frightened by steadiness. She lifted the gavel, felt the familiar distribution of mass, and pictured the room. Outside, the rail, the seal, the ring of faces at varying altitudes of shame and defiance. The courthouse is a lung, she told a first-year class once. It breathes with you or against you. Your job is to make sure it breathes honestly. When she stepped back out, the hallway was full of that electric hush that follows bad news and weddings. Word had slithered and leaped in equal measure. Between stenographers, across the clerk's window, down the marble stairs to the security desk, where a man who'd been there 15 years suddenly forgot what his hands should do when he wasn't holding a stapler. Inside 3A, the gallery had grown by inches. People who weren't supposed to be there had become people who couldn't leave. "All rise," Cole called, and the room rose like a field stands when wind runs it one way. Maya took the bench. She did not announce herself because the robe and the room did that for her. "We are back on the record," she said, and the court reporter's posture perked by reflex. "Before we proceed, I'm issuing the following orders." She read them into the microphone in the simple, bulletproof language of a woman who had spent 2 decades learning how words bend when people try to outrun them. Preservation of all interior and exterior video, immediate duplication of storage, seizure of any department-issued phones in the possession of officers on the scene pending extraction, hold and audit on the body cam automatic backups, chain of custody assignments by name. Any deviation from these orders, she added, will be treated as willful spoliation and contempt. We will not litigate the past with ghosts. The sentence landed like a sandbag on a truck bed. In the second row, a clerk who had never once used the word spoliation mouthed it quietly to memorize the shape. "Officer Maddox," she said, and at the name he jerked as if someone had tugged a wire through his bones. "Please return to the stand." He rose in a series of imprecise angles and took the witness chair like a man trying to sit on a moving boat. Maya waited until he settled, and then until he realized she was going to wait until he met her eye. "You remain under oath," she said. "You recall your earlier statements?" "Yes, Your Honor." "You testified to a camera malfunction?" "Yes." "And yet we have just heard your voice, unedited, on a backup system that uploads automatically. Do you have any explanation for that contradiction other than the obvious one?" His mouth opened, closed, tried again. I thought the upload hadn't... "The cloud does not file for extensions," Maya said. A shadow of humor, bitter and quick, crossed the back benches. It died fast under the weight of the moment. She turned the tablet so the room could see again. "We will now play additional footage. Security camera 4, interior vestibule, then camera 9, northwest exterior. These angles capture the moments prior to and following the assault. They also capture 2 additional officers." Cole dimmed the house lights one notch and the screen brightened. The vestibule camera showed the doors yawning open, the slam of light, the jerk of bodies moving too fast through a place built for deliberation. On the second angle, you could see the deputies' phones held low, the way people do when they know they shouldn't be recording and cannot help themselves. You could see a laugh happen without hearing it, and you could feel it anyway. What sort of country evolves a sense for silent laughter, Maya thought. The kind that teaches people to read rooms for danger before they can read for pleasure. "Identify the 2 deputies," Maya said. "Rodriguez and Thompson, Your Honor." "Have either given statements?" "I don't know." "You will find out," Maya said, "because I am ordering them detained in the witness room pending counsel and recording of statements. They will surrender their phones to the marshal." She looked to Cole. "Bailiff?" "Yes, Your Honor." Maya touched the screen again and the view switched to the body cam backup. The audio in the room shifted from the broad brush hiss of HVAC to the intimacy of a clipped microphone. The first 10 seconds were just breathing and the creak of nylon and the way a man says, "Let's go," to himself when he wants to hear a coach. Then words, not the kind you print on training posters. Gasps are not instruments, they are animal noises. The ones the gallery made belong to the body that houses shock. Mercer's pen, sturdy, stainless, left 2 clean dots of ink on a legal pad like a colon at the end of a sentence she never meant to write. "Officer Maddox," Maya said when the clip ended, "earlier you represented to this court that you used minimum force, that any injury the defendant sustained was due to her own resistance, and that you encountered verbal aggression. Do you wish to amend any portion of that testimony now that you have heard your own words and seen your own actions?" He stared into the middle distance like someone had written the right answer there. "Yes," he said finally, the word a tiny, arid sound. "Yes, Your Honor." "Which portion?" "All of it, Sam," he said. "The record will reflect that the witness retracts his prior statements as inconsistent with video and audio evidence," Maya said. "Counsel for the state, you may wish to evaluate the viability of your charging posture." Mercer stood as if the floor had given her a polite nudge. "The state will reconsider in light of the new evidence, Your Honor," she said. "We also request time to confer regarding potential charges for—" Maya didn't make her finish it. "We'll get there." From the back row, a second movement. The door opened an inch, and then a full body came through from the hall, an internal affairs badge on a chain, a face organized around quiet. The woman took a seat along the wall, like a person who had slipped into a church only to realize there was a wedding underway, and she might be related to the groom. Maya met her eyes for a fraction. Talia Nguyen. "Officer Maddox," Maya said, bringing the room back to the fulcrum. "You told this court earlier that people claim titles to avoid accountability. You used the phrase 'play the victim.' Do you recall?" He nodded, throat bobbing. "Do you have any evidence that I claimed any title, other than the title my employment records carry?" No, Your Honor." "And did you look at any identification I attempted to provide?" His eyes closed, opened. "No." "The court finds your earlier testimony was knowingly false," Maya said, each word a step on a staircase to an upper floor the building had not visited in some time. "We will address the consequences of that later." She turned her attention from the witness chair to the room. "To everyone else, we are not here to write a better story for the state. We are here to anchor ourselves to what the cameras saw and the microphones heard, and what the laws we all claim to know actually demand. A beat, the kind of beat that lets the blood find its path after you remove a tourniquet." "Now," Maya said, softer, "Ms. Mercer, you may be heard regarding the state's request." Mercer set her pen down with the devotion of someone laying a tool on a workbench after it broke. "Your Honor, in light of the presented footage and audio, the state is withdrawing the pending recommendations against the individual detained at the defendant's table. Further, the state requests leave to consult with the Attorney General's office and the U.S. Attorney regarding potential referrals." "Granted," Maya said. "Make the calls. Document the timestamps. I want logs." Zoe had stopped writing 3 minutes in. She looked from Maya to the little red recording light on the ceiling and back, like a person watching a lighthouse point to a sandbar everyone had insisted was a myth. "Bailiff Cole," Maya said. "Yes, Your Honor," he answered from the aisle, where Rodriguez and Thompson now sat on a bench in the witness room behind a glass pane, hands empty, faces blank in the overlit way of men who have stepped out of narrative and into evidence. "You will escort Officer Maddox to a seat directly in front of the bar," Maya said. "He is not under arrest at this moment. He is under observation. He will not handle his phone. He will not speak to the 2 detained officers. If he needs water, give him water." "Yes, Your Honor." Maddox stood, moved 2 paces, sat. His hands trembled in his lap, and he pressed them together as if clasping could become repentance by the sheer force of friction. Maya addressed the court reporter again. "Mark the time. We are going to play one more clip." Cole dimmed the lights another breath, and the room held still as the backup from Thompson's unit buzzed into life. What came next wasn't a slur or a shout. It was worse. The greasy banter of men sure that no one but them would ever hear them. The laugh that goes up when someone says something that, even in the telling, takes something. The casual certainty that viewing another person's pain is a team sport with unlimited home games. When she stopped it, you could hear fabric creak as people re-inhabited their own clothes. "Officer Rodriguez? Officer Thompson?" Maya said, turning toward the glass as if it were air. "Do you wish to revise any statements you claim to have made today?" They looked at each other through the exhaustion that comes when the department-issued stories fall apart in your hands like a cheap umbrella in wind. Rodriguez lifted both palms, small and outward. "Yes, Your Honor." "Then you will do so on the record, with counsel present, after we adjourn this session," Maya said. "Today." She turned back to the room and spoke in the register she saved for lines that needed to travel beyond the walls. "This is not a saga about a malfunction. This is not a one-off. What we are doing right now is not theater. We are using the exact tools this building invested in to tell the truth of itself." Mercer sat down and rubbed her eyes with the heel of her hand, a small human gesture in a room designed to make human gestures look out of place. Talia Nguyen scribbled something quick on a pad that looked to someone 10 feet away like a list that had been building quietly for months. Maya looked at the clock and then at the faces. "We will break for 10 minutes, she said. "Counsel for the state, please step into chambers when called. Officer Maddox, you will remain seated. Bailiff, ensure no device leaves this room." A pause, a pivot back to the witness room. "Deputies, think carefully about the value of a lie when the camera has decided to love the truth." The gavel's kiss on wood was soft. The sound that followed wasn't chatter, it was the shuffle of people rearranging their moral furniture. In chambers, Mercer stood by the window, arms folded, eyes on the alley where a line of delivery trucks waited like cattle. "I'm not going to pretend this is salvageable," she said before Maya even sat. "The safest thing is to withdraw everything we put on the table and hand the package to people with badges that say federal." "Good," Maya said. "Do that, and send me your letters memorializing it. We're not going to let clarity get smudged by time." Mercer nodded. The tough part of her softened half a degree. "Judge Ellison, I'm sorry." "For what?" Maya asked, not unkindly. "For living in a system where minimum necessary is a spell we cast over things that hurt," Mercer said. "For getting used to the spell." "Then don't get used to it anymore," Maya said. "None of us can afford the comfort." When she returned to the bench, the gallery had shifted again. The room had acquired elders, 2 church ladies in pastel suits, a custodian still in a gray shirt with a bleach mark on the left shoulder, a translator who'd taken a late lunch and sat with her badge flipped to the blank side. The courthouse had called, and the city had answered with its softest soldiers. "We are back," Maya said. "I am going to place several matters on the record regarding next steps." She laid them out clean. Referrals to the U.S. Attorney's Office for potential civil rights charges under 18 U.S.C. Secretary 242, referral to the state AG for a pattern or practice review, orders to Internal Affairs to open an expedited review of conduct for Maddox, Rodriguez, and Thompson, a formal notice to the city concerning potential Monell exposure around training, supervision, and failure to discipline. And, she said, this court is issuing a preliminary order to impound and review every case file over a 5-year period in which Officer Maddox is the arresting or principal witness. The review will be conducted by a special master appointed by this bench. The aim is not to embarrass the department. The aim is to stop seeing the same story in different clothes. A murmur, the warm kind, ran the benches and then left by the vents. Maddox lifted his head the way a man lifts it to ask the foreman what the overtime looks like this week. "Your Honor," he said, voice hoarse. Am I under arrest?" "Not at this moment," Maya said, "but I strongly advise you consult counsel and stop speaking." She glanced at the door. "Public Defender's office?" A man in a suit 2 seasons old stood. "Michael Carter, Your Honor. I've been assigned to Mr. Maddox." "May I confer with my client?" "You may," Maya said, "in the conference room adjacent to the witness room, without his phone." Carter nodded and gestured. Maddox stood on new legs and walked with him, and the door closed behind them with a hush that felt like a reprieve given to someone who had never believed in reprieves. The rest of it belonged to craft, paperwork like architecture, notices like scaffolding, the business of making tomorrow less likely to repeat today. She issued signatures and looked at people while they spoke and let silence do work most judges hand off to volume. When she finally set the gavel down for what felt like the 5th time in an hour, the day had discovered a new shape for itself. "Court is in brief recess," she said. "We will reconvene at 2:20 with status on compliance and next steps." The bench stood up and the room followed. Outside, the plaza was brighter than it had any right to be on a day like this. The muffin vendor looked up from a brown paper bag as Maya passed. He didn't say a word. He tipped his head, a salute from one citizen to another. In the hallway, Zoe reached the edge of the air that carried Maya and found words waiting there like someone had planted them last night. "Judge," she said carefully, "I know I'm just a clerk, but thank you for making the cameras count." "Zoe," Maya said, "we're all clerks to the truth on a good day." She let herself smile, small and real. "Let's have more good days." In the corridor that led to chambers, Cole walked 6 feet behind like a witness protection plan for hope. He didn't speak until they reached the door. "My mother's church," he blurted. "They always said the devil loves paperwork because nobody reads it. Feels good to make the paperwork belong to us for once." Maya looked at him, at the lines around, his eyes that belonged to a man who had spent years holding doors and watching which ones closed. "Then let's read every page," she said. By the time the clock crawled past 2:15, the courthouse had found a new rhythm. The phones on the second floor rang less and meant more. The IT office had printed chain of custody forms like they were hymnals. In a glass box off the hall, Rodriguez and Thompson sat with counsel, styrofoam cups cooling between their palms, faces turned toward a future that wasn't any of the futures they had pictured. And in the little room where the fluorescent lights hummed, Public Defender Michael Carter leaned across a metal table to a client whose uniform still smelled like starch and pride, and said in the slow, patient tone you use when you are saving a man from his own mouth, "From this point forward, you will not improvise. Do you understand me? The improvising part of your life is over." Maddox stared at the table, jaw working like a machine that had lost a tooth. He nodded. His eyes were wet, but the wetness belonged to fear, not to the part of the soul that can name harm. On the bench again, Maya read a note from Chief Carter. External drives mirrored, off-site copy verified, warrants drafted for phone extractions, the federal civil rights liaison on the line at 3. She stacked the notes neatly, one by one, until the pile sat square. The bruise beneath her eye pulsed with a dull, workmanlike ache. She breathed through it the way she coached witnesses to breathe through cross. When Cole called the room to order this time, the sound wasn't dramatic. It was practiced. It was the sound of a building remembering what it was made to do. "We are reconvened," Maya said. "Let's finish the part of the day this room owns." The courthouse breathed, slow, honest, and the city beyond its doors adjusted its shoulders as if someone had laid a new coat across them. Not heavier, not lighter, just finely fitting. By the time the clock slid past 2:20, the air in 3A had the taut feel of a bridge holding more weight than the engineer promised. People had drifted in from other floors with the respectful hush of neighbors at a fence line. The seal behind the bench looked heavier, like it knew it had been asked to carry more than ceremony. Maya returned to the bench with a binder so thick it made a physical argument. Not the slim case file kind, but the kind of book that changes your posture when you lift it. Cole took it from her and set it on the ledge with a thump that made two men in the gallery flinch. He slid an easel from behind the jury box and propped a cardboard backer on it, low-tech on purpose. No one could accuse her of hiding behind pixels now. "We are on the record," Maya said, and the reporter's keys clicked back to life. "I'm going to walk the room through a set of facts that do not care who is tired of hearing them." The first page in the binder was a cover sheet stamped with 3 seals: Court Administration, Internal Affairs, and the bland city department that handled data the way a refrigerator handles leftovers: keep, forget, repeat. Beneath the seals, a short title: Pattern Analysis, Arrests, Complaints, and Dispositions. Officer C. Maddox. 5-year window. Maddox shifted in his seat under the bar. Michael Carter leaned closer without touching him, a public defender who had learned how to say breathe without sounding condescending. "Exhibit A," Maya said, tapping the binder. "Internal Affairs Complaint Log. 47 formal complaints over 15 years, 14 in the last 5. Dispositions, 39 unsubstantiated, 6 not sustained, 2 training recommended. No formal discipline on record." She didn't raise her voice. The numbers did their own work. Exhibit B, Arrest Statistics. Over the last 5 years, Officer Maddox booked 1,257 arrests. Of those, 88% involved people of color. Time 300 millims. The patrol area demographics are a very different picture. Cole flipped the first chart onto the easel. Bars, rising and falling, colors standing in for lives. He felt ridiculous holding a foam core board in a room full of digital screens. Then he watched faces in the second row react to the height of a red column, and he stopped feeling ridiculous. Sometimes the eye needs a mountain. Exhibit C, Use of Force Reports, Maya said. Force was used in 62% of arrests involving people of color, 11% involving white suspects. This is not adjusted for type of offense. The state may provide that later. I am satisfied with the gap as it stands. Mercer stared at the floor, which had decided to tell stories today too. Scuffs that said who'd been here, how often, how hurried. She wrote something she would later tear off and slide across a table to someone with a longer title. Exhibit D, Dispositions, Maya said. Of the arrests of people of color, 432 cases were dismissed outright or tossed after suppression, reasons including lack of probable cause, evidence issues, constitutional violations, 40%. Michael Carter closed his eyes. He didn't need an adjustment to know what 40% meant in a building where the public waited for permission to believe what it had witnessed all their lives. Exhibit E, Civil Payouts and Settlements with Officer Maddox named, deposed, or present in the report chain. $2.3 million over a decade and a half. The city calls those costs of doing business. The people who paid for them call them rent in a house they never agreed to live in. She let the sentence sit, unstirred, until its heat sank into the wood. "Where did you get those numbers?" Maddox asked, stunned. "From your department," Maya said. "From public records. From internal affairs. From files sent to this bench months ago because I asked." Along the wall, the woman with the IA badge lifted her chin a degree. Talia Nguyen had run the numbers twice, then asked a statistician to run them again. Because numbers don't care about hurt feelings or wishful thinking. Cole slid the second chart onto the easel. Bars again, but this time 2 colors kissed and did not touch. The first row looked like a city skyline, the second like a small town on the prairie. Maya didn't point. She let the board sit there, an accusation in cardboard. "We call these paper cuts," she said. "One by one, the public doesn't see them. You file a complaint, you're told it's unsubstantiated. Maybe you file another, maybe you don't. But lay the paper cuts side by side for a decade and a half, and you can see the artery we've been sawing through." A woman in the third row shifted forward, fingers tight around a sun-cracked tote. Cole felt something pull in his chest. He had seen her before. So had Maya, without looking. "Would Ms. Rosa Delgado please approach?" Maya said. Rosa rose carefully, voice that would have been at home reading to children. "You filed a complaint in 2009 after a traffic stop?" "Yes, Your Honor. He pulled me over for a brake light. Told me I didn't belong in that neighborhood. When I asked for his badge number, he said if I liked numbers, I could remember the one on the back of the patrol car, because that was where I was going." "Disposition of your complaint?" Maya asked. "Unsubstantiated," Rosa said, the word landing with the dull weight of a stone thrown in winter water. "Did Internal Affairs interview you?" "No." Talia wrote in a furious shorthand that looked like a doctor's prescription for sunlight. "Thank you," Maya said. "You may step down or stay and watch." "I prefer to watch," Rosa said, returning to her pew. "The court recognizes Exhibits AE are numbers," Maya said. "Ms. Delgado is not. She is what the numbers refuse to forget." "Internal Affairs Investigator Nguyen," Maya said, and Talia took the stand. "You provided the compiled complaint log and 5-year snapshot of arrests and dispositions?" "Yes, Your Honor," Talia said, "at Chief Judge Carter's request." "Do they fairly represent your records?" "They do, to the extent our records are complete." "Describe the early warning system for officers who exceed baseline," Maya said. "There's a matrix that pings for thresholds. Complaints per quarter, force incidents per month, civil payouts linked to a badge. In practice, pings get treated like a check engine light on a road trip. You see it, you tell yourself it'll hold till the next town. And in Officer Maddox's case, it pinged multiple times. What happened? Training, mentorship, temporary reassignment, no formal discipline with teeth. "Thank you, your candor is noted and appreciated," Maya said. From the second row, a new presence slipped in, camera bag, hair in a practical knot. Sienna Brooks didn't raise her phone. She raised her attention. "Captain Rourke Daniels," Maya said, summoning. He entered with the practiced blankness of a cop walking into a room where other cops had already ruined his day. Sworn, he tried to refuse personnel talk. "You can discuss policy," Maya said, "and whether it does what the public was told." "The policy exists," he conceded. "It is applied unevenly." "What would make it even?" "Resources. Leadership willing to take a short-term hit to avoid a long-term crisis." "What is this moment if not the crisis collecting its bill?" "A reckoning," he said. Maya flipped a page. The ring squealed like a hinge that needed oil. "This is a list of cases where Officer Maddox's testimony served as the primary basis for a warrant or conviction. A special master will review for patterns, boilerplate language, improbable narratives, chain of custody gaps, and any evidence of perjury or coercion." "Some of you think this is vengeance dressed as due process," she said to the air where doubt perches. "It is not. The only thing easier than hating a person is forgiving an institution because it never had a face. Today we have faces and facts, and we have the law. We will use all three." Zoe felt the hair rise on her arms. She wrote faces plus facts plus law and underlined until the paper dented the wood. Sienna wrote 2 words: counts matter. The final chart, 1 thin line for complaint volume over time, a second for formal discipline imposed. Two strangers who crossed twice and never again. The court cannot order a heart to grow, Maya said, but we can order a procedure that stops the bleeding while the city decides whether it wants to be healthy. She signed an order with long, durable strokes. Appointment of a special master, scope of review, deadlines, reporting to state and federal authorities. She named the statutes plainly so they knew they were welcome. 42 U.S.C. Secker 1983, 18 U.S.C. Secker 242, perjury under Fire 1621 and Fire 1623, Monell liability, Brady obligations, Rule 106, completeness. Counsel, she said to Mercer, confer with the state AG on a joint letter of intent for pattern or practice evaluation. I want it on my desk in 72 hours. If the federal partners prefer to lead, we will not sabotage that courtesy. Understood, Your Honor, Mercer said, smaller, more human. Captain Daniels, provide the written description of matrix triggers, thresholds, and the last 3 years of ping logs. Redact names other than Officer Maddox's. Preserve an unredacted copy under seal. Yes, Your Honor, he said, the look of a man finally carrying a box to the attic. Investigator Nguyen, coordinate access with the special master. Ms. Delgado, your presence is noted in a way letters can't measure. Rosa lifted her chin a half-inch. Gracias. Maya took in the room, aired out after a long winter. The draft remained. Drafts always do. We will recess for 20 minutes to reduce the temperature and raise the clarity. When we return, I will address charging and referrals on the record, and we will talk about what happens to a pattern when you stop pretending it's a quilt. The gavel tapped, gentle as a fingertip on a sleeping child's shoulder. People stood because the room asked them to. In the hallway, the murmur turned into a river. Someone cried without sobbing. Someone laughed without smiling. Sienna stepped to the landing where the light was best and recorded 30 seconds of marble and passing feet, context the listeners would feel in their bones. She did not narrate. Not yet. Zoe found shade under a corkboard and texted the one friend from law school who hadn't rolled his eyes when she said she believed in courtrooms. You seeing this? He sent exclamation marks, then one sentence that made her eyes sting. I'm seeing you. In the witness room, Rodriguez and Thompson sat with attorneys, eyes glassy. Cooperate floated like a balloon with too little helium. Cole stood outside the glass, arms folded, learning how to be still in a way that wasn't surrender. Maddox sat across from Michael Carter again, hands now stationary, eyes hollow like a building after a fire. You're going to tell the truth, Carter said. Not because truth will love you back, but because the lie has left you alone in a room and it's hungry. 20 minutes gone. Maya was back on the bench. The binder sat where she'd left it. The charts leaned against the easel, dumb and faithful. We are reconvened, she said. The court will now address charging intent and referrals. Maddox's name hung in the air like a bell you could feel more than hear. But before she said it, before she set each statute like stones across a river, the rear doors opened again and a figure hesitated in the frame. A small pause, the kind you'd miss if you hadn't been living inside seconds all day. Talia glanced up. Mercer tightened her grip on the pen. Sienna's thumb hovered over record and did not press. Something in the figure's posture said news had reached further than the courthouse. The quiet carried new weight, and the room learned all at once how a pattern behaves the moment you stop calling it a coincidence. The figure in the doorway was not a camera and not a reporter. It was Chief Judge Evelyn Carter, no robe, gray blazer, flats that made no sound, looking like a person who had walked through 3 locked doors because none of them had the right to stay locked. The hush bent around her. She gave Maya a small nod that was all steel and no theater, then took a seat in the front row where everyone could see her do nothing but watch. Maya didn't name her. Power doesn't always need an introduction. On charging, she said, voice even. The court will refer the matter of assault on a judicial officer, perjury, and potential deprivation of rights under color of law for charging review. The state and federal partners will be notified immediately. She paused just long enough to make the adverb mean something. Immediately has already begun. Mercer lifted the mic on counsel table. We have the U.S. Attorney on at 3 o'clock, Your Honor. State AG's Civil Rights Bureau is on standby. She glanced at Carter, not pleading, not performing, just letting the bench see the cables being pulled taut. Good, Maya said. I want written confirmations of receipt with timestamps. Chain of custody extends to truth. Sienna's phone stayed on the table, screen dark, but her pen moved, fast and tight. She wasn't here for a soundbite, she was here for the architecture. In the witness room, Rodriguez and Thompson signed a pair of consent forms with hands that turned their names into charcoal scratches. Their attorneys watched the pens like snakes. Talia Nguyen watched the dates. She had learned early that the difference between incompetence and corruption lived in timestamps. Maddox's public defender leaned in close again. Listen, Michael Carter said softly, a palm hovering over the table without landing. The state is recalculating and the feds are looking at you with new eyes. From this moment, any statement you make that isn't blessed by me and recorded will be a nail you hammered yourself. Do not build your own coffin. Maddox stared past him to the glass, where the courthouse. Seal looked back like a moon caught in daylight. The loneliness of being the most important person in a disaster clung to him like sweat. Back to the record, Maya said, bringing the room's attention home. Internal statements for administrative purposes will proceed with Garrity protections. Criminal interviews will proceed under Miranda. Clean teams will be observed. We are not going to ruin a prosecution to make today feel good. Captain Rourke Daniels reappeared, drawn back by the gravity of the words that could affect his command more than any budget meeting. He took a spot against the wall, hands behind his back, wedding ring gleaming like a lighthouse that only flashed when you needed to remember where home was. Captain, Maya said, eyes still on the bench's notes, your officers will be advised properly. Any deviation will be corrective on paper and painful in practice. Understood? Yes, Your Honor, he said. The yes of a man who'd run out of maybes. Outside, the plaza's noise had shifted tenor. Not a protest, the permits office would not have coped, but a gathering. Church mothers in pastel with canvas chairs that could fold in two, students with backpacks and eyes that drank everything, a custodian who'd slipped out on his break. They didn't chant. They kept a respectful distance from the steps. It was not a siege. It was a vigil you could attend in daylight. A translator from the traffic court came down with a thermos and paper cups, pouring out coffee like communion. In the corridor off 3A, Zoe ducked into a stairwell for cell service and called one number she had memorized without wanting to, her mother. I'm okay, she said, before the hello finished. Something big is happening. No, it's better than the usual. Yes, like the videos, only the camera is on our side. She listened, eyes stinging at the simple relief of someone older saying they were proud. Back in chambers, a red light blinked on the conference phone. Mercer, already there with a legal pad, nodded at Maya. U.S. Attorney, she mouthed. Cole shut the door. Maya pressed the button. A voice with no image filled the room with the particular calm of federal prosecutors who have seen worse and know better. They paused for identification. They asked about evidence in terms that didn't waste air. They used the word preserve 5 times in 3 minutes, which made Maya like them immediately. The call didn't last long. Good calls don't. As the line clicked dead, Cole knocked and peered in. Your brother's at the staff entrance, Your Honor, he said carefully, as if family itself might be inadmissible. He says it's not urgent, but he's here. Maya felt an old door open in her chest. 2 minutes, she said. Marcus waited in the sliver of shade where the smokers used to stand before the courthouse, banished smoke, and pretended it had banished fire. He wore a principal's tie, solid, reassuring, cheaper than it looked. He saw the bruise and kept his face from doing the thing faces do. "You don't have to be here," Maya said, failing to sound annoyed on purpose. "I'm not," Marcus said. "I'm at lunch with a sandwich that took a detour." "You good?" "I'm standing," Maya said. "Then the city can stand too," he said. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket, one of his students' drawings, rainbows and scales of justice, and a blocky black robe. "Camila wanted you to have this after she saw you last year. I forgot because I'm the brother who forgets. Seems like today is the day I remember." "Tell Camila she has a good eye for line," Maya said. "She already knows," he grinned, then sobered. "You sure you're okay with the city seeing you do this?" "They've seen me do less for longer," Maya said. "It's time they see the middle of the job, not just the end." He squeezed her shoulder and left without looking back, which is its own kind of faith. When she came back to the bench, the air had thickened into focus. The same faces were there, but their attention had changed shape, as if each person had decided to carry their own end of something heavy to make it possible for the room to lift what it had to lift. "Status," Maya said. Mercer rose. "Preservation notices sent and acknowledged. It confirms mirrors complete, off-site verified, warrant applications for phone extractions drafted, and with the duty judge for signatures." "Thank you," Maya said. She looked to Talia. "Internal interviews?" "Scheduling now," Talia said. "Garrity advisements printed, separate teams for criminal tracks identified. We're clean." Maddox sat at the edge of an island in a sea that wanted him gone and yet refused to let him drown in the absence of process. His mouth opened, closed. He turned to Michael Carter. The lawyer shook his head once, slowly, an entire semester of ethics condensed into a single gesture. Maya glanced at the clock. "Before we move to formalizing referrals," she said, "the court will set expectations. No one is to speak to the press on behalf of this court other than the clerk's office. The public has a stake in this. They also have a right not to be lied to in fresh ways." From the third row, the custodian from traffic court raised a couple fingers, a kid's permission ask. Maya nodded. "Ma'am," he said, then corrected himself. "Your Honor, I just wanted to say, it's good to see the cameras mean something. My cousin had a camera once that meant nothing." "Thank you," she said. "We will try to deserve that." The phones on the counsel table buzzed in sympathetic rhythm, a newsroom push alert, a union statement draft, a federal email with a subject line that started with RE. The news was outside now, not frenzied but steady, the way trees talk to other trees through roots. Sienna did not post. She wrote a paragraph in her head and let it stand there to see if it could stand without adjectives. "Captain Daniels," Maya said, bringing his name back like a rope thrown again to a man who took it the first time. "Your union has circulated a message. I will not ask you to confirm that on the record. I will tell you this. Any attempt to coordinate accounts will be treated as obstruction. The days of scripts in this building are over." He swallowed and nodded. "Understood, Your Honor." "And for those in this room who have spent a career being told to look away," Maya said, projecting just enough for her words to settle in the back rows, "I am telling you to look toward. If you saw something today and you slept okay the last 5 years, you need to ask yourself why. The court will not punish honesty that arrives late, but it will not bless silence." Cole stood immobile in the aisle, choosing which version of himself he wanted to be in the second half of his career. The door to the witness room clicked. Rodriguez emerged with his attorney, face flayed of swagger. Thompson followed, grim as a hangover. Behind the glass, a tech in a navy polo clipped a right blocker onto a phone and began the small priestly rituals of data extraction. Zoe caught a look from Talia, barely there, acknowledgement between two people who had decided to make their jobs bigger than their job descriptions. Mercer checked the clock again and looked to the bench. "Ready for the final read-in, Your Honor." Maya lifted the referral orders. They were not elegant. Paper rarely is. She read them into the record like naming parts of a body to a first-year anatomy class: assault on a judicial officer, assault in the first degree, perjury, 18 U.S.C. Thacker 242, any applicable state civil rights analog, obstruction considerations for any coordination attempts, and, as an administrative matter, immediate suspension pending outcome, gun and badge surrendered to the marshal's office before the building surrendered them to storage. "Officer Maddox," she said, after the last paragraph sat where it needed to, "you will stand." He did, a fraction too fast. The cuffs were not on his wrists, not yet. His hands twitched like they were remembering metal. "You will surrender your service weapon to the marshal at once," Maya said. "You will surrender your badge. You are suspended effective now, pending the outcome of these referrals. You will not enter this building without permission of the court. You will not contact any witness. You will not access any city system." "Yes, Your Honor," he managed. "If you say Your Honor because your lawyer told you to," Maya said, "make sure your body learns what your mouth is trying on." "Bailiff," Maya said quietly. Cole didn't need more. He signaled a marshal, and the exchange happened without theater. The unbuckling of a holster, the weight transferred to a neutral hand, the bright circle of metal disappearing into a dull gray drawer. The room exhaled, but did not relax. It wasn't time. Outside, a siren Dopplered past, a reminder that the city was still a city and somebody else's emergency was happening in parallel. The plaza had gained a child with a jump rope, which felt both wrong and perfectly right. Sienna stepped out to call her producer. "Not a headline," she said into the wind. "A spine. The piece is the shape of a system being forced to carry itself correctly." "Can you say that again, with fewer metaphors?" The producer sighed. "No," Sienna said, smiling at herself, and hung up. Inside, Maya took a sip of water that tasted like chlorinated relief and set the glass down so carefully it made a sound anyway. "We are going to move into controlled chaos now," she said. "Counsel, you will coordinate with federal partners. Investigator Nguyen, you will shepherd internal process. Captain Daniels, your officers will report to the witness room in sequence for on-record statements. Ms. Mercer, your office will prepare a memorandum of recusal as appropriate for conflicts. Mr. Carter," she turned to the public defender, "you will keep your client safe from himself." Michael Carter nodded with the gravity of a man who had carried bus stops on his back and called it a Tuesday. "And one last thing," Maya said, the timbre shifting to something softer that somehow weighed more. "If anyone in this building thinks today is about humiliation, they are wrong. Today it is about calibration. We've been height measuring a child against the wrong door frame for years. We're adjusting the frame." There was a pause large enough to admit a future. Then Cole called a recess that didn't sound like surrender so much as interval. Movement resumed, purposeful and quiet. Paper left one desk and found another. Signatures sprouted like winter weeds where they had been forbidden to grow. The courthouse moved like a machine designed by people who finally read the manual. Back in the side room, Maya stood with her palms on the stainless counter again, the bruise a violet crescent now. She breathed through her nose. In her peripheral vision, in the dark mirror of the window, she saw the silhouette of a woman in a robe that did not make her taller but did make her exact. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. She almost ignored it, then didn't. The message was 11 words and a name. "We never thought cameras could love us. Today they did. Rosa." Maya let the smallest laugh escape, the kind that is just an exhale that brought a thought with it. The door knocked once. Cole leaned in. "They're ready for you, Your Honor." She nodded and lifted the gavel. Her hand found the nick at the base without looking. "Let's put it on the record," she said. When she returned to the bench, the building felt taller. The people in it looked the same and different, like a family at a reunion after a funeral. The work was about to become granular and exhausting and unglamorous, the kind of labor no one puts in a montage. Maya adjusted the microphone and spoke in the pitch you use when you are leading a room through a narrow hallway. "On the matter of accountability," she said, "we begin." The words rippled outward, down the stairs, under the doors, across the plaza, into the quiet language of neighbors who still believe in telling each other what the weather is doing even when both of them are standing in the rain. The microphone caught the scrape of wood as Maya nudged the binder aside and leaned into the bench. A courthouse swallows plenty of speeches. This one arrived without the puff of performance. It felt like the kind of talk a parent gives a household, quiet, necessary, and final. "You've heard the tapes," she said, voice low enough that people had to lean in, and by leaning, become part of it. "You've seen the pictures, you've watched the room change shape. I'm going to put words to what the cameras already told us." The court reporter's hands hovered in the ready position, and even her machine seemed to still. "First," Maya said, "what happened on the steps this morning was an unprovoked assault. Not a misunderstanding, not an unfortunate escalation. An assault. It occurred in the shadow of a nameplate this community trusted, and it was followed by a story that did not survive sunlight." Maddox stared at the knot in the wood grain in front of him, as if it might open and swallow him whole if he stared hard enough. "Second," Maya continued, "this building did not fail to record. Our systems worked. Our people will work with them. The truth did what the truth does when you don't trap it." She flipped one sheet with the neatness of a person slicing a thread. Third, the narrative presented by Officer Maddox, erratic, refused, minimum necessary, and that remarkable phrase, "she claimed to be important," is not borne out by the record. It is contradicted by it. When testimony and tape disagree, the tape wins. Not because it's perfect, because it doesn't care who's talking. She paused long enough for the room to hear air again. Out in the plaza, a bus whooshed to the curb, released a handful of passengers, and moved on. "Fourth," Maya said, "what we saw does not live by itself. We saw contours today that match decades of paperwork, complaints dismissed with the same stamp, arrests told with the same adjectives, force explained with the same tired sentences, the same rooms, the same signatures, the same outcomes. Patterns are just repeated choices with better lighting." She let her gaze move across the rows. Rosa in her aisle seat, hands wrapped around the tote like a small anchor. Zoe with a pen idle in her fingers. Talia with that forward tilt of a person who never learned to pretend they didn't care when numbers bled. Sienna, back row, notebook down now, eyes up as if watching a tide change. "And last," Maya said, "the purpose of the justice system is not to protect the feelings of people who wear it. It's to protect the public that owns it." She set the page aside and lifted her head fully to the gallery. "I'm going to say something I don't say lightly. This courthouse is ours, not mine. Ours. The seal behind me belongs to a city that pays for the lights and the paper and the salaries and the cameras and the hope. We owe you receipts." A murmur like wind passed through the benches and left them in better order than it found them. She turned back to the practical shape of the day. On the record, the footage from cameras 7, 4, and 9 is entered as court's exhibits 1 through 3. The audio from the body cam cloud backups as exhibits 4 and 5. The complaint logs and summaries from internal affairs are admitted as court's working exhibits A through E for the limited purpose of informing oversight and referral. The special master appointment order stands. Counsel, you'll meet with Chambers within 24 hours to set timelines. Mercer stood. Understood, Your Honor. Her voice had changed. The lawyer cadence remained, but something in it had set down a weight. She looked over at Rosa, then back at the bench. We'll comply and coordinate. Good. Maya regarded the public defender. Mr. Carter? Yes, Your Honor. You will ensure your client understands any contact with potential witnesses or tampering with devices will be treated as obstruction, Maya said. Today's transparency will not be rewarded with tomorrow's games. He nodded. He understands. Maddox nodded a half-second after his lawyer, late to the rhythm he never learned. Captain Daniels, Maya said without looking down, your staff will prepare a written description of any script training used in the last 14 months for courthouse security. Phrases, checklists, response grids. If a manual exists, I want it. If it doesn't, I want the emails where people pretended one did. Rourke inhaled, exhaled. Yes, Your Honor. Talia, Maya said, and the IA investigator straightened. If any complaints were closed with no interview of the complainant, flag them. We'll start there. Yes, Your Honor. Maya let the floor creak once. Now the part nobody likes. She didn't raise the gavel. She didn't need to. Officer Colin Maddox, she said, this court finds there is probable cause to believe you committed an assault on a judicial officer in the performance of her duties and offered materially false statements under oath related to that assault. The court refers those matters for prosecution as previously ordered. In addition, in light of your access to other officers and department systems, the court imposes a no-contact order with any identified witness, absent counsel, and a subpoena. You will surrender all department-issued electronics to the marshal before you leave this floor. Violation of these conditions will result in immediate remand. Michael Carter closed his eyes and opened them, briefly grateful. The difference between a leash and a cell is the difference between a chance and a story's last page. Maddox's lips moved around a sentence that didn't find sound. Maya looked to the gallery again, to the rows of faces arranged like chapters. To those watching from the back, some of you don't trust rooms like this anymore, and you have excellent reasons. I'm not going to fix that with one afternoon. I'm not going to ask you for faith. I'm going to ask you to watch the paperwork, watch the deadlines, watch who calls back and who doesn't. Watch us. If we do it right, the watching will become habit. If we do it wrong, your watching will be evidence. Rosa's shoulders eased down a fraction, a small surrender to relief without giving up vigilance. She murmured something to herself in Spanish, a prayer or a promise, maybe both. On the aisle, Cole stood straighter. The idea that paperwork could mean something at his mother's table felt like a holiday he hadn't celebrated since he was a kid. People have asked me quietly whether today is personal, Maya said, the softness returning without weakening the steel. Of course it is. I am a person. But personal does not mean petty. I have spent the better part of 2 decades watching lives change because the state decided to exercise its power. We are going to exercise it carefully now, and we're going to keep the receipt. She gestured to the clerk, who began distributing copies of orders to counsel, preservation, special master, phone extraction protocols, clean team memos. The pages traveled like white birds through the room, landing on tables, under pens, in hands that wanted to hold something weighty and redeemable. Counsel, Maya said to Mercer, you will draft a proposed order for the appointment of an independent ethics advisor to monitor disclosure compliance for the state in any matter involving Officer Maddox's past testimony. The advisor will have access to your files and the authority to flag omissions in real time. The age of "we'll get you those later" is over. Mercer hesitated, less resistance than recalibration. We can do that. Good, Maya said. She looked at Captain Daniels again. Consider this your green light. If you ever needed a bench to say, do the right thing and take the heat, I'm saying it. The city will be angry. Better now than in a civil complaint 3 years from today. Rourke let out a small, humorless sound. Understood. From the back, Sienna finally hit record. Not to blast, to archive. Her audience didn't need fireworks. They needed the steady backbeat of institutional language being bent toward transparency. Before we break, Maya said, I want the record to reflect something no order can. The people in this room changed what this room could do. A clerk who noticed a spine that belonged on a bench. An investigator who ran numbers until they stopped making excuses. A bailiff who decided his timing could be redeemed by truth. A grandmother who sat down again instead of going home. And yes, a prosecutor who put down a pen and picked up accountability. Mercer's mouth pressed into a line that wanted to be a smile and knew better. Officer Maddox, Maya said quietly, turning finally back to the man whose name had become the kindling and the match. You told the court this morning that people like me should learn our place. My place is here. Yours is where the law puts you when you forget your oath. Between those places there is process. We're going to follow all of it. A single tear broke loose from the bright rim of Maddox's eye. It clung to his cheek and then surrendered to gravity. He didn't wipe it. He didn't know if he was allowed to. Bailiff, escort Mr. Carter and his client to the marshal for the surrender of items outlined in the order, Maya said. Then to the conference room to finalize conditions. He is to be released from the building under escort. He will not return without leave of court. Yes, Your Honor, Cole gestured. The marshal stepped up. The ritual began. A man turning out a pocket, the clink of a department phone on metal, the dull thunk of a badge being set down like a borrowed book returned late. Maya did not look away. Rituals matter. You respect them by witnessing. On policy, she said once the door closed, pivoting the room back to structures. As of this moment, all courthouse security posts will utilize dual entry protocols. One on the east, one at Main, both with camera zones clearly marked and signage posted in plain language. Identification requests will be acknowledged and physically examined before any escalation. The phrase minimum necessary will be defined by written standard, not memory. Training will be scenario-based, not check the box. Body cams will be tested at shift start with logged results. Backup servers will be mirrored daily and audited weekly by an outside vendor. Talia scribbled as fast as human hands could keep up. Zoe's pen flew. Rourke nodded like a man copying down the recipe for a dish he'd eaten his whole life but never learned to cook correctly. And because the city deserves more than intra-office memos, Maya added, this court will host a public session in 30 days to report on progress, not a press conference, a report. Numbers, deadlines, failures included. A rustle of surprise swept the back rows, then acceptance, the kind that sounds like a room's posture improves by half an inch. Lastly, Maya said, some of you are waiting for me to make a speech about racism in America. I don't need to. The tape spoke. The numbers spoke. Ms. Delgado spoke. What I will say is simple. Bias is not a ghost. It has fingerprints. It has timestamps. It has budgets. If you want to fight it, you don't swing at air. You pull records. The sentence sat there and made itself at home. She signed the last order with the slow, deliberate strokes of someone aware of being watched and intent on being worth the watching. She handed it to the clerk, who slid it into a stack that would become history or kindling, depending on what the building did with it tomorrow. We are in recess for 1 hour to allow counsel to execute, Maya said. When we return, I will enter formal findings and set a calendar for oversight. The gavel landed, soft, final, and the room released itself without breaking apart. People stood in clusters that weren't teams so much as task forces. Conversations snapped open at low volume. Papers traded hands like passports. The vigil outside shifted. A woman in a blue sweater started humming something sweet and unshowy. Zoe stepped into the hall and leaned against cool marble, texting her friend again. It's not just a moment, it's a plan. He sent back a single word that landed like an oath. Finally. Sienna moved to the landing for 30 seconds of ambient, the thread of the humming winding through her audio like a promise. This is not the sound of a crowd, she whispered to the mic. It's the sound of a city remembering the difference between a story and a record. Down the corridor, Talia handed a thin folder to Rourke. These are the pings you ignored, she said. No heat, just inventory. He took it like a man accepting a baby at a baptism, awkward and careful. Not anymore. In the small conference room, Michael Carter looked at his client and saw the strange, sharp animal called remorse circle the edges of the man's face without committing. You're not special, he said. No one is. That's why the law works when it works. Maddox nodded. He had stopped pretending he understood how to steer. Maya stood a moment in chambers with the window cracked, Riverton air sneaking in with the smell of concrete and coffee and rain that would come late. Her phone buzzed, a message from Chief Judge Carter, good scaffolding, keep going. She slid the phone aside and looked at the paper on her desk, the simplest artifact of government and the hardest to make honest. Her brother's drawing was propped against the lamp, rainbow lines and a blocky gavel, the scales in a child's hand perfectly balanced because why wouldn't they be? She felt the ache under her eye pulse once, a metronome for the long afternoon. When she came back to the bench, the room stood as if choreographed by breath. On the record, she said, findings of fact and calendar. The courthouse listened. The city leaned closer, and the line in the sand, drawn not with anger but with ink, held. 6 months is not long enough to change a city, but it is long enough to prove a city can be changed. The courthouse in Riverton learned to breathe on a slower count. The automatic doors still sighed, the coffee still tasted like ambition and burnt beans, but somewhere under the routine, something else had nested. A habit of checking the mirror before leaving the house. The first snow had come and gone. Maddox's case had traveled the way cases travel when the evidence knows the route by heart. Indictment, arraignment, hearing, trial. What used to feel like an obstacle course felt more like a procession. Solemn, brisk, necessary. The jury took 2 days, not because they were confused, but because they were careful. They returned with verdicts that mapped cleanly onto the tape and onto the words people said when the microphones were working. Assault on a judicial officer, perjury, deprivation of rights under color of law. The statute sounded less like threats and more like coverage. Insurance the city found in its own books. At sentencing, the judge assigned by lot spoke softly, without grandstanding. He read out the years like a table of contents, concurrent here, consecutive there, and when he was done, 25 years without parole stood in the air, not as revenge, but as a measurement. The sound in the room did not rise, it folded in. Maddox left through a door built for leaving everything. Protective custody swallowed him like a system swallows its own. Word drifted back like litter caught on a fence. Mornings in a book that didn't comfort, afternoons under a television mounted too high. In a place full of noise, silence found him easily. No one owed him sympathy. Some people had it anyway, because that's who they were, not because he deserved it. The court's other orders had grown legs. The special master's office, 2 rooms borrowed from the basement, cheap fluorescent, a secondhand ficus with a lien, turned into a factory for untying knots. Volunteers from the law school came on Saturdays. Public defenders pulled boxes older than some of their clients and learned to name dust like it mattered. They reopened file after file where Maddox's name curved across probable cause statements like a snake. They counted the canned phrases, the dates that made no sense after 9 p.m., the chain of custody gaps a mile wide. The first exoneration happened in January. The clerk cried while she typed, wiped her eyes, kept typing. By March, dozens of cases collapsed under the weight of their own shortcuts. In April, a man walked out of prison into a wind that slapped his face like he owed it money and laughed high and hard all the way to the bus stop. Rosa Delgado came to watch that first exoneration like a relative at graduation. Same tote, cleaner shoes. When the man's mother turned and cried into the nearest shoulder, it was Rosa's, and the old woman held the young woman the way the city wants to think it holds everyone, firm but gentle, long enough to count. Internal Affairs published a report under Talia Nguyen's name in February. It wasn't a report that disappears under a title with 4 colons. It read like a weather bulletin you ignore at your own risk. Pings the department ignored, policies drafted and never implemented, training recommended, used like a bandage where stitches were needed. Talia wrote without adjectives and saved her outrage for footnotes with sources. She recommended an overhaul of the early warning matrix, discipline for supervisors who treated red flags like decoration, and an audit of every officer whose numbers traveled like Maddox's. The document landed on desks and dais and gathered signatures, not dust. Captain Rourke Daniels survived. Survival looked like this, testifying under hot lights, saying, "We failed into a working mic," then sitting in a parked car for 10 minutes to practice doing nothing before doing something decent. He demoted 2 supervisors, recommended termination for 2 more, signed off on suspensions that made enemies, and slept the kind of exhausted sleep that lets you wake without a dream stuck in your throat. When the union grumbled, he pointed at the spreadsheets, the tape, and the calendar. Pick your hill. We're done dying on the wrong ones. The training changed. Not just the PowerPoints, the scenarios. Scripts stopped starring non-compliant subject. They hired actors to make people practice the real out loud. Minimum necessary got rewritten in sentences that could stand in court, in front of grandmothers and children with clipboards. Body cam backups acquired redundancy to make a NASA engineer exhale. Servers mirrored like nervous twins. A private vendor audited each week and stapled honesty to a calendar. Signs went up at both entrances with language for human beings, not robots. Show ID, we will look at it. Zoe Patel didn't leave yet. The appellate judge's clerkship became a fellowship, a year with the special master, then return. She took it. She carried the stack that needed carrying that day. When she finally left, she packed the muscle memory of a room that chose not to flinch. Sienna Brooks' episode, "The Day the Cameras Worked," went out in February and did not explode. It seeped. It found commuters, insomniacs, kids at kitchen tables. She narrated like a knuckle on a door, ambient hum, breath after the gavel, Rosa's gracias wrapped in hush. Fireworks were requested. She delivered a steady fuse. It burned all spring. The plaque went up in March, a modest bronze rectangle catching morning light. Here, on a winter morning, the record spoke for itself. Below it, smaller, Justice Ellison Courthouse. People paused and read. Some touched the metal. Some took a photo and didn't post. 7th graders scribbled institutional reform into lined notebooks while a teacher explained without crying. Rosa opened a tiny legal clinic between a barber and a tax place, ribbon cut with kitchen scissors. A window sign, walk-ins welcome, we believe you. Public defenders on Wednesdays, coffee too strong, cookies too sweet. Stories once labeled unsubstantiated arrived with copies, dates, names. The clinic logged every intake like it mattered, because it did. Maya taught one evening seminar, records as remedy. Haig v. CIO as a map, Brady as a dare, Rule 106 as a lantern. Bias isn't a ghost, she said, it's a ledger. Anger sparks movements, evidence sustains them. A kid wrote it down twice, first as a quote, then as a to-do. Letters came. A hospital waiting room in Kansas sparked a records request. A postcard from Milwaukee, "We're stealing your special master order." An email from a smaller city, "I was Maddox, I quit, starting again." She printed it and filed it under. Not for show. Chief Judge Carter never took a victory lap. She moved budgets like a mechanic swaps parts, killed pet projects to fund audits, hired a compliance manager whose job was to ask annoying questions and smile through glares. Late one call. "The scaffolding is up. We'll be building for a while." Rourke's officers made check-ins a discipline to be proud of. A whiteboard at each shift. Stuff we got right. Stuff we fixed today. Day one. Nothing on the left. By April, the left filled first. The city paid real money, then renamed the line item from risk management to reinvestment. A measure narrowly required half of any civil payout linked to misconduct to be drawn from the department budget. Thunderous statements followed. Training went up. The early warning system got the software update Talia asked for. Back in 2019, and 3 times since. Maya didn't get easier, she got plainer. Findings like recipes, ingredients, method, time, temperature, calendars published, misses published too. Late, because witness was late. Witness was late because we forgot to call. We will call. The internet said what it says. She didn't read it. Zoe stopped. Sienna read just enough to find the next story. A middle school art class drew places that keep us safe. A quiet kid drew a courthouse, a rainbow, a tiny bronze plaque. Letters so careful his tongue stuck out while he finished. He taped it to the fridge next to a report card that said he was reading on grade level now, thank you, and he believed it. Marcus added a civics unit. Who runs this place? Maya declined the invite. She sent Rosa. 30 teenagers learned exactly what unsubstantiated feels like, and what it feels like when a room makes you larger. My uncle stopped filing, a boy said. We'll file together, Rosa answered. Dual entry protocols felt odd for a week, then felt normal. Officers looked at IDs they asked for. People reached slower and were treated like citizens. Small sermons on small signs. We will look you in the eye. We will tell you what we are doing. You may ask for a supervisor. A warm evening in May. A dedication, quiet by design. Brief words, briefer smiles. Rosa pulled the cloth. The plaque was smaller than Maya expected and larger than she wanted. Applause like a graduation row where the name means something. Thank you, Judge, a voice called. Thank you for your attention, she answered, because attention had done as much work as her gavel. The clinic kept its doors open with donated fans and repaired AC. The special master's office stacked boxes better, hired a coordinator with forearms for furniture. Talia moved on to a state bureau, leaving Rourke a note. You can call me when you need to. You will need to. By June, little rituals replaced old ones. Bailiffs announced, rooms listened. Deputies looked up from phones. The roller date stamp clicked like a metronome of promise. The haunted second-floor printer jammed less. Someone bled the tray like a radiator, and it gave up its ghosts. July heat tried to melt the asphalt into a slow river. Maya took one late day she owed herself and met Marcus on the steps with 2 coffees, one sweet, one profitable mistake. You look older, he said. I am, she smiled. So are you. They swapped cups. Justice has a sense of humor. A family climbed the steps, red dress, summered shirt, Spider-Man sneakers. The boy bounced like taking a castle. The woman touched the plaque like checking a roast. The man gave a small chin-up. We see you. She returned it. Think it sticks this time? Marcus asked. Maya watched doors open and close. Zoe crossed the lobby with a banker's box. Rourke held a door for Rosa, who pretended not to notice and noticed everything. Old Stone hummed. Justice doesn't stick by itself, she said. We pin it down again and again. The gavel-shaped keychain in her pocket ticked like glittering resolve. And when the pins bend, we find more. Light moved from honey to amber. Trucks growled, buses sighed, kids ran, sirens sliced and faded. Doors opened, doors closed. The plaque caught sun. The record kept speaking. Inside, a clerk entered a minute order with a citation destined for a law review note nobody's grandmother would read. And that would still make her proud if someone explained it well. The security line moved with patience and less theater. A bailiff tilted a new officer's gaze to a sign, "We will look at your ID." A habit formed that would save him one day. Down the block, a kid popped a small wheelie because he could. On the steps, two siblings finished coffee and stood at the same time without planning, the way they had since being told to wash up before dinner. They didn't say legacy. They didn't speak of heroes. They walked back into a building that now expected more from itself. Hinges quiet, doors left just ajar for second chances to find their way in. And if someone asked why a video of a judge calling roll on the record had been watched 50 million times, the best answer wasn't the number. It was the sentence Rosa wrote on the clinic whiteboard on a humid afternoon when the marker squeaked, "Truth always finds a record." Underneath, smaller, in blue, "Bring yours." The city did, again and again, and the courthouse kept being what it had been forced to remember how to be. Not perfect, not pure, just a place where the camera loved the people as much as the marble. A place where a gavel wasn't a weapon, it was a metronome. A place where justice didn't hit back for spectacle, it hit back to steady the beat. In the end, justice didn't roar. It spoke steady and clear through the voice of a woman who refused to stay silent. One slap exposed a system. One judge reminded us that truth, once seen, can't be unseen. If this story moved you, share it. Because somewhere out there, someone's still waiting for their moment to stand up, and your voice might be the one that helps them do it. Thank you for watching. Stay brave. Stay human, and never stop believing that justice can still rise, even from the hardest fall.